The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unforgiving glow across the sterile conference room. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, my fingers tracing the edge of a manila folder that contained everything they thought they knew about me. Around me sat 12 pairs of eyes, some curious, some indifferent, and a few already gleaming with smug satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. My name is Nadia Carter, and until 20 minutes ago, I was the director of operations for Sterling & Company, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. At least, that's what it said on my business card. What it didn't say was the woman who worked herself to the bone, or the person who sacrificed every holiday, every birthday, every damn personal milestone to keep this sinking ship afloat. No, none of that mattered here. Not when there were egos to stroke and profits to chase. I could feel the weight of their stares as Marcus Sterling, the third-generation heir to the company's legacy, cleared his throat. His tailored suit hung perfectly on his frame, accentuating his arrogance like a well-placed accessory. Beside him sat Evelyn Harper, HR's golden girl, her lips curled into a practiced smile that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. The rest of the executive team filled out the seats, each face more forgettable than the last, except for Greg Langley, the CFO, whose smirk made my stomach churn. "Nadia," Marcus began, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "we've called you in today because we need to discuss your performance over the past quarter." Performance. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Performance? Was he serious? Over the last 6 months, I'd single-handedly turned around 3 failing accounts, brokered deals that brought in millions, and kept morale from completely collapsing after yet another round of layoffs. And now, performance? But before I could respond, Evelyn leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad like a sword ready to strike. "We've been reviewing the numbers, Nadia, and frankly, they're concerning. Your leadership style has come under scrutiny, and several members of your team have expressed dissatisfaction with how projects are being managed." Dissatisfaction? My mind raced back to the endless hours I'd spent mentoring junior analysts, staying late to ensure deadlines were met, and mediating conflicts between departments so everyone could focus on delivering results. Dissatisfaction? From whom? "And let's not forget the Anderson account," Greg chimed in, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "That disaster cost us significant revenue. We can't afford missteps like that moving forward." The Anderson account. Of course. It wasn't enough that I'd salvaged what little remained after their initial strategy imploded. Apparently, taking responsibility for someone else's failure was still considered mine alone. But I bit my tongue, knowing full well where this conversation was heading. This wasn't about numbers or leadership styles, it was about control. About power. About making sure anyone who dared rise too high remembered exactly where they belonged. Marcus folded his hands on the table, his expression shifting from patronizing to outright predatory. "Given these concerns, we've decided it's best if you step down from your position immediately. Effective today, you are terminated." The room went silent. For a moment, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the hum of the overhead lights. Terminated. The word echoed in my mind, hollow and final. In front of everyone. They hadn't even waited until I left the building to do it privately, discreetly. No, this was a spectacle, a public execution designed to send a message, to me, to anyone else foolish enough to think they could climb higher than their station. I forced myself to meet Marcus's gaze, refusing to let them see me break. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Evelyn handed me a packet of papers, her smile razor-thin. "Here's your severance agreement. Please review it carefully. You'll have 48 hours to sign and return it." I took the envelope without looking at her, my fingers trembling slightly but not enough for them to notice. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. Every step felt heavier than the last, each click of my heels against the marble floor reverberating through the halls like a countdown to something inevitable. As I passed by cubicles, heads ducked low, avoiding eye contact. Coworkers I'd trusted, mentored, supported, they scattered like leaves in the wind, unwilling to risk association with the woman who'd just been publicly humiliated. Back in my office, I closed the door behind me and sank into my chair. My hands gripped the edge of the desk as I stared at the framed photo of my younger self, standing proudly beside my parents at my college graduation. Back then, I'd believed in fairness, in hard work paying off, in people recognizing value beyond titles and paychecks. How naive I'd been. For the next hour, I packed up my belongings, methodically placing items into a cardboard box. The photo, a coffee mug gifted by my team last Christmas, a leather-bound notebook filled with ideas I'd never get to implement. Each object felt like a piece of myself being stripped away, leaving behind only emptiness. When I finally stepped onto the elevator, the doors closing behind me, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished metal. My makeup was flawless, my hair perfectly styled, my outfit impeccable. To anyone else, I looked composed, unshaken. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Something dark and dangerous stirred awake. They wanted to make an example of me. Fine. But examples can cut both ways. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a dimly lit cafe downtown, nursing a lukewarm latte while scrolling through emails on my phone. On paper, I should have been devastated. Unemployed, betrayed, humiliated. It was the kind of narrative that usually ended with someone spiraling into despair. But instead, I felt alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't beholden to anyone else's expectations. No meetings to attend, no quotas to meet, no manipulative bosses breathing down my neck. Just freedom, and a burning desire for justice. It started small. A LinkedIn post congratulating Marcus on his recent promotion, subtly hinting at the questionable ethics behind some of his decisions. An anonymous tip to a financial blogger about irregularities in Sterling and Company's quarterly reports. Nothing major, nothing traceable, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. Enough to make them wonder if maybe, just maybe, firing me hadn't been such a smart move after all. Then came the call from Rachel Kim, a former colleague who'd always been loyal, if quietly so. She sounded nervous, glancing over her shoulder as she spoke. "Nadia, I don't know if you're aware, but things are falling apart over there. Morale is at rock bottom, and people are starting to talk. Some of us, we want to help." Help. The word sent a thrill through me. Help meant allies, leverage, ammunition. And leverage was exactly what I needed to turn the tables. Over the next few days, Rachel fed me information, emails, memos, internal documents detailing everything from unethical client practices to blatant favoritism within the executive team. With each new revelation, the pieces of my plan fell into place. It wasn't enough to simply expose them. I wanted to dismantle the very foundation they'd built their empire on. Slowly, systematically, I would burn it all to the ground. One evening, as I sat cross-legged on my living room floor surrounded by printouts and sticky notes, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're playing a dangerous game." My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly masked my unease with a smirk. Dangerous? Good. That meant I was getting close. By the third week, whispers of discontent had spread throughout Sterling and Company. Employees began questioning management's decisions, clients grew wary of signing contracts, and stock prices dipped ever so slightly. Still, I knew I needed something bigger, something undeniable, to truly bring them to their knees. And then it hit me, a project I'd worked on months ago, buried deep in the archives, containing evidence of fraud that could implicate not just Marcus, but the entire board. Getting access wouldn't be easy. The files were locked away in a secure server, accessible only to top-level executives. But I'd spent years navigating corporate politics, learning how to exploit weaknesses others overlooked. If anyone could crack it, it was me. As I prepared to execute the final phase of my plan, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Revenge wasn't supposed to feel this good, was it? Yet with every calculated move, every secret uncovered, I felt more powerful, more untouchable. They thought they'd destroyed me, but in reality, they'd created something far worse, a woman with nothing left to lose. And they were about to regret it in the worst way possible. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sun streamed through my apartment windows, painting the walls gold, but I barely noticed it. My mind was already racing ahead, mapping out the steps I needed to take. Today wasn't just another day, it was the beginning of the end for Sterling and Company, and I intended to make sure they remembered my name long after I was gone. First things first, getting access to that secure server. It was risky, yes, but risk had become my middle name over the past few weeks. I dressed casually, a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, and grabbed an old laptop from the back of my closet. This wasn't the sleek MacBook I'd used during my days at Sterling. This was a beat-up Dell I'd picked up at a thrift store months ago, wiped clean of any identifying data. If anyone tried to trace me, they'd find nothing but dead ends. I headed downtown, stopping at a cafe near Sterling's headquarters. From there, I could monitor their network activity without raising suspicion. Using a burner phone Rachel had slipped me, I connected to a public Wi-Fi hotspot and initiated a remote login attempt into the company's system. Breaking into a corporate server isn't as glamorous as Hollywood makes it seem. It's tedious work, requiring patience and precision. But I'd spent enough late nights troubleshooting IT issues at Sterling to know exactly how their systems operated. Weak passwords, recycled credentials, outdated firewalls. It was almost laughable how careless they were when it came to cybersecurity. After 2 hours of careful maneuvering, I finally breached the server. My heart pounded as I navigated through layers of encrypted files until I found what I was looking for, Project Helix. A code name I recognized instantly. It had been one of Marcus's pet projects, supposedly shelved after failing to deliver results. What no one outside the executive team knew was that Helix hadn't failed. It had succeeded spectacularly, generating millions in illegal profits funneled offshore to avoid taxes. And buried deep within those files were emails, invoices, and transaction records tying every single member of the board to the scheme. I downloaded everything onto an external hard drive, encrypting it multiple times before logging out cleanly. No traces left behind. By the time I closed my laptop, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from exhilaration. I had them now. Every dirty secret, every unethical decision, every lie they'd ever told was mine to wield however I saw fit. That night, I met Rachel in a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. She looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, clutching her jacket tightly around her. "If they find out." "They won't," I interrupted firmly. "Not until it's too late." She hesitated, then nodded, handing me a flash drive. "This has everything else I could gather. Internal audits, whistleblower complaints, even some voice recordings from meetings. You'll need to be careful, Nadia. They're watching everyone closely." I slipped the drive into my pocket, giving her a reassuring smile. "I'm always careful." As we parted ways, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Rachel was risking everything to help me, her career, her reputation, maybe even her safety. But guilt wouldn't stop me. Not now. Not when I was so close. Back home, I spent hours combing through the new material Rachel had provided. Each document added another brick to the wall I was building against them. There were memos detailing discriminatory hiring practices, expense reports showing lavish personal purchases charged to company accounts, and damning evidence of environmental violations covered up by bribes. It was more than enough to destroy Sterling and Company, but I wanted something bigger. Something unforgettable. By dawn, I had a plan. I would leak the documents incrementally, feeding the press just enough information to keep the story alive while forcing the executives to scramble for cover. First, I targeted a financial journalist known for his investigative pieces. An anonymous email landed in his inbox early Monday morning, containing redacted copies of the Helix files along with a note promising more to come. Within hours, whispers of scandal began circulating online. Analysts questioned the company's ethics, investors demanded answers, and employees started speculating openly about who might be implicated next. But that was only the beginning. Over the following days, I released additional leaks to different outlets, each one more explosive than the last. Social media lit up with hashtags like #SterlingScandal and #corporate-corruption, turning the story into a viral sensation. Reporters camped outside Sterling's offices, hounding executives for statements. Clients pulled contracts, lawsuits piled up, and the stock price plummeted further with each passing hour. Marcus and Evelyn tried to spin the narrative, issuing denials and blaming rogue employees for the allegations. But the public wasn't buying it. With each denial, another leak surfaced, exposing their lies and contradictions. Even Greg, the smug CFO, crumbled under the pressure, resigning abruptly amid rumors of a federal investigation. Still, I didn't let up. Every victory fueled my determination to push harder, strike deeper. Late one night, I hacked into the company's internal messaging platform and broadcast a message to every employee. To the people of Sterling and Company, you've been lied to, manipulated, and exploited by those in power. The truth is out there, waiting to set you free. Stand together, demand accountability, and remember, you are stronger than they think. The response was immediate. Employees began organizing walkouts, filing formal complaints, and speaking out publicly about the toxic culture Marcus and his cronies had fostered. Some even reached out to me directly, offering support and sharing additional evidence. The rebellion I'd hoped for was taking shape, growing faster than I'd anticipated. Yet, despite the chaos unfolding around them, Marcus refused to step down. In fact, he seemed determined to fight back, rallying loyalists within the company and launching smear campaigns against anyone who dared oppose him. He even went so far as to accuse me of orchestrating the leaks out of spite, portraying me as a bitter ex-employee seeking revenge. And maybe he was right. Maybe revenge was part of it. But it wasn't the whole story. This wasn't just about settling scores or proving a point, it was about justice. About holding powerful people accountable for the harm they caused. About showing the world that no matter how high you climb, how much money you make, or how untouchable you think you are, your actions have consequences. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment reviewing the latest round of leaks, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, the message read, "You win. Let's talk." It was Marcus. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or scream. Did he really think a simple text could undo everything he'd done? That I'd roll over and forgive him because he asked nicely? No. Absolutely not. I typed back a single word, "When?" He replied instantly, "Tomorrow. 8 p.m. My office." I smiled to myself, tucking the phone away. If Marcus thought he could negotiate his way out of this mess, he was sorely mistaken. Tomorrow night, I'd walk into his office, not as the woman he'd humiliated in front of everyone, but as the architect of his downfall. And when I left, he'd know exactly what it meant to regret crossing me. Because this wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The next evening, I stood outside Sterling and Company's headquarters, staring up at the towering glass building that had once been my second home. It felt surreal to be here again, knowing how much had changed since the last time I walked through those doors. The air was crisp, carrying a faint chill that matched the cold determination in my chest. I adjusted the strap of the messenger bag slung across my shoulder, it held everything Marcus would need to see, and stepped inside. Security barely glanced at me as I swiped my old keycard, courtesy of Rachel's resourcefulness. My termination hadn't triggered an immediate deactivation of my access privileges, a mistake they'd soon regret. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, save for the soft hum of machinery and the steady rhythm of my breathing. When the doors slid open, I found myself face to face with Evelyn Harper, who looked like she'd aged 10 years in the span of weeks. Her usual polished demeanor was gone, replaced by exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Nadia," she said, her voice tight with unease. "Marcus is waiting." I gave her a curt nod and strode past without another word. His office door was slightly ajar, light spilling out into the darkened hallway. Pushing it open, I entered the lion's den. Marcus sat behind his desk, looking smaller than I remembered. Gone was the cocky executive who dismissed me so casually. In his place was a man on the verge of collapse. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, and his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You wanted to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. My tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. He gestured for me to sit, though I remained standing. "Let's cut to the chase, Nadia. You've made your point. Now tell me what you want." "What I want," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "You mean besides justice? Accountability? Respect for the people you've trampled over to get where you are?" "This isn't about justice," he snapped, slamming his fist on the desk. "This is revenge, plain and simple. Admit it, you're doing this because you're bitter." "Bitter?" I laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Oh Marcus, if only it were that simple. Yes, firing me publicly stung. But this isn't about me. This is about every single person you've exploited, lied to, and discarded when they were no longer useful. You think power absolves you of responsibility? That money can buy silence forever." His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He knew I was right. I set the messenger bag on his desk and pulled out a stack of documents, placing them neatly in front of him. "Here's everything you need to know about Project Helix. Every transaction, every bribe, every offshore account tied directly to you and your board members. There's also a list of employees willing to testify against you, along with recordings of your meetings discussing illegal activities. Oh, and let's not forget the whistleblower complaint I've already filed with the SEC. Marcus paled, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. You can't do this. I already have, I replied evenly. The media has most of it. The authorities will have the rest by morning. Your empire is crumbling, Marcus. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what I'd done, and what was about to happen, hung heavy in the room. Finally, Marcus leaned back in his chair, defeated. What do you want from me? He asked quietly, his arrogance stripped away. Nothing, I said. You took everything from me when you fired me, not just my job, but my dignity, my pride, my sense of worth. I don't want anything from you now. What I want is for the world to see you for who you really are. A fraud. A coward. A thief. With that, I turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I paused and glanced back at him one last time. By the way, Marcus, remember that Anderson account you blamed me for? Turns out the client emailed me last week. They're filing a lawsuit against Sterling for breach of contract. Looks like karma really does come full circle. And then I was gone. The fallout was swift and merciless. By sunrise, the headlines screamed of corruption, embezzlement, and corporate greed. The board dissolved overnight, executives resigned en masse, and federal agents raided the offices within hours. Investors fled, lawsuits piled up, and within weeks, Sterling and Company declared bankruptcy. It was a spectacular implosion, broadcasted live for the entire world to witness. As for me, I disappeared from the spotlight almost as quickly as I'd entered it. No interviews, no press conferences, no grandstanding. I simply moved on, using the severance package they'd forced upon me to start fresh. I opened a consulting firm focused on ethical business practices, helping companies avoid the pitfalls that had doomed Sterling. Word spread quickly, and before long I was thriving, not because of revenge, but because I'd built something real, something meaningful. One day, while scrolling through LinkedIn, I came across a post from Rachel. She'd landed a leadership role at a rival firm, crediting her success to lessons learned during her time at Sterling. Beneath her photo, dozens of former colleagues had commented, sharing their own stories of resilience and growth. Seeing their messages filled me with a quiet pride. We'd all survived Marcus's reign of terror, and emerged stronger for it. That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker below, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. Revenge hadn't healed me, not entirely. But justice had. And sometimes, that was enough.